Senior Anthony Figueredo and Delia Gallagher, who covers the Vatican as a reporter. Great to have both of you. Monsignor, we were wondering whether something had gone wrong. This went very long.
We need to remember that both the last two pontiffs were elected on the second day. That makes tomorrow even more important. There's going to be a lot of prayer, a lot of maneuvering this evening in order to suss out those top candidates, the leaders in this conclave.
So, Delia, 3 hours for this whole thing to go. Does this seem about right or too long or
I
too
think
short?
it might be about right. We'll be able to double check that tomorrow, because we've got more candidates now that are in there trying to get their votes in, and probably the black spoke what we expected tonight.
All right. Well, it is 9 o'clock, and no doubt the Cardinals are probably hungry and ready for dinner. They have an early start tomorrow.
And tired, too.
That's right. Once again, black smoke from the Sistine Chapel, signaling to the world no pope has been elected. The 133 voting Cardinals will resume bright and early tomorrow.
Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a special report for CBS News. Alongside Nora O'Donnell, I'm Maurice Dubois in Rome. Do have a good afternoon.
Welcome back. I'm Lindsay Reiser. You've been watching a CBS News special report following the completion of day one of the papal conclave inside the Sistine Chapel. Just after 3 o'clock on the East Coast, just after 9 in Rome. This evening in Vatican City, black smoke rising from the Sistine Chapel, signifying a new pope has not been elected today after the first vote. The conclave of 133 Catholic cardinal electors from 5 different continents began 16 days after the death of Pope Francis. The cardinals locked inside the Sistine Chapel. They began voting after proceeding inside, beginning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. So a candidate for Pope has to get 2/3 of the votes plus 1 to be elected. The last 3 popes have been elected in 2 or 3 days, making tomorrow all the more crucial. And I'm told by our producer, who is on the ground there in the square, saying that black smoke is still being emitted. Let's go ahead and go to CBS News papal contributor Candida Moss now on the phone. She is also an Edward Cadbury Professor of Theology at the University of Birmingham in the UK. Candida, good to talk to you. This was mostly what we expected. We didn't think maybe after one vote with so many ideologies, so many cardinals in one room, that we would have a pope this soon.
That's exactly right, Lindsay. We expected that maybe perhaps Paroline would go in with an advantage, but the idea that a pope would be elected on the first ballot, that would be absolutely historic, and it has never happened before in recorded history. So this is what we expected. We just expected black smoke a lot sooner.
And so I don't know if you've been able to see any of the images, but there are tens of thousands of people there to watch this part of history. Such a unique process. We know people have traveled from all over the world just to be there. What is your reaction to the crowds that we're seeing take this in?
Well, the crowds are both a tribute to Pope Francis in the way that he's really re-energized the church and welcomed people back in, and also a kind of sign of hope for the future. One of the reasons people gather there is precisely because of the very tangible quality of the smoke that we can see emitting over the Sistine Chapel. It makes people feel included in a process that is very guarded and secretive.
And so you had mentioned one of the popefuls, Cardinal Pietro Parolin of Italy. Can you go through some of the others that we will be watching? I know Cardinal Tagle of the Philippines is one, Cardinal Pizzaballa of Italy also another. Can you talk about who are some of the biggest names that you're watching?
Yeah, so Cardinal Tagle, who was also someone we were talking about in the 2013 conclave from the Philippines. He is someone we think of as more liberal. He's called the Francis of Asia. And he's someone who we could see really taking on board the Francis mantle. People have also talked about Matteo Zuppi of Bologna, who similarly has been really interested in outreach to the poor. And they've spoken a great deal about the conservative Peter Erdo from Hungary and the similarly conservative African cardinals Peter Turkson, Robert Serra, and Fridolin Abongo Bazungo.
Now, in the special report, we did hear the Monsignor talk about the maneuvering that might take place after this, and it looks as though the smoke has stopped emitting there from the chimney in the Sistine as I'm watching these live pictures along with you. But the Monsignor had said that there could be some maneuvering to suss out what's happening. We obviously don't know the way the votes went. Those of us who saw the motion picture conclave can have an idea of what the maneuvering looks like. But do you agree that there will be some discussion, maybe some sidebars that take place inside the Sistine or the Casa Santa Marta tonight?
Yes, absolutely. This evening over meals and also on sort of strolls and things, there will be maneuvering. And in this first ballot, as in the movie Conclave, there would have been about 30 to 40 votes that were just cast for individuals or a couple of votes for a particular cardinal. And those are the votes that will be up for grabs tomorrow morning when those cardinals reposition themselves behind the front runners.
And remind us of previous conclaves. I know that in the last three popes that we've had have been either elected in 2 or 3 days. Pope Francis, I believe, was elected after 5 ballots. So, you know, he obviously, in those first 4, wasn't the one to get the most votes. But what has history taught us about how long this could go and sort of the surprises that are along the way?
Well, the shortest conclave in history was only 10 hours, but that was a long time ago. And the longest, as we've heard, throughout the day lasted over 3 years. And in fact, the cardinals had to be locked in order to force them to make a decision. For the past century, we haven't seen a conclave go longer than 4 days. And the reason for this is the cardinals want to appear united to the world. If it takes too long, then the church appears divided, and it appears much less as to be operating under the auspices of divine power if they just can't make up their minds. So we should expect to know probably before the weekend, either tomorrow afternoon on East Coast time or on Friday. We should expect to find a new pope.
Okay, Candida Moss, you heard it here. Thank you so much. Let's now go to CBS News special correspondent Nora O'Donnell in Rome. And Nora, you were spearheading our coverage all morning long of the solemn processions that we were witnessing as the Cardinals headed into the Sistine. And now what a juxtaposition with the cheering that we just saw now with the emission of the black smoke.
Yeah, it's been an extraordinary day filled with anticipation as the Catholic Church is at a crossroads deciding who will be the next pope. And just incredible because we've been waiting now 3 hours and 14 minutes since they closed the door and put all those cardinals in a lockdown for their very first vote. Typically, when we look back at the last couple of conclaves, it was around 8 p.m. local time that we learned that the smoke came out and there was, not a pope chosen. It's now past 9 o'clock here in Rome time. So we all started to get a little nervous and sort of wonder what's going on. Why is this taking so long? One of the reasons is there are more cardinals. Remember, this is a conclave unlike anyone we have seen before. Why? Because there's much more cardinals and a much more diverse group of people. And so I think, many of them are new to this process as well. So I think that probably accounts for why this took a little bit longer. But as soon as that black smoke came out, the 45,000 people that were in St. Peter's Square reacted, and they've been waiting along with us. We're on top of a convent, and the nuns are all up here as well, trying to get a sense of whether a pope would be elected tonight. But so the other thing people are thinking about right now, too, is the average age of these cardinals is over 60 years old, and it's 9 o'clock, so they're likely tired. They're likely ready to have some dinner, and they've got a long day tomorrow where they have to be back in session at 9:15 a.m. local.
I was going to ask you more about the logistics because I heard you and Maurice talking about how they must be hungry, and I was hearing some of your coverage this morning. I don't know if the basic pasta is tonight. I mean, curious minds want to know. It's not just that I'm pregnant and have food on the brain, but what are the logistics now about what the rest of their night looks like? And so 9:15 in the morning, you said Eastern time, so that's 3:15 in the morning that they start tomorrow?
No, 9:15 local time.
Okay.
So I'm living on local, Rome time, after I'm here. And hey, just like you, I think we're hungry too. It's 9 o'clock. It's past dinner time for us too. So I can only imagine how those Cardinals feel. But yes, so again, it's 9 p.m. Here in Rome. So they've got to get back to the Casa Santa Marta, which is the guest house where many of them are staying. They will have dinner tonight. There will likely be some conversation. And then, of course, they're going to try and get some rest. And they are scheduled to start again inside the Sistine Chapel at 9:15 a.m. local time. And they've got to have 2 votes in the morning before they are expected to break around 12:30 local time. And then they have a break from about 12:30 local time till 3:45. And then again, 2 votes after that, because they want to get in 4 votes tomorrow. And I heard you mentioning earlier, of course, Pope Francis was elected after 5 votes. So tomorrow could be a very big day, not only the voting, but of course, then the waiting that then happens, the crowds that build in St. Peter's Square. Then, of course, when the Pope is announced and appears in that loggia, that balcony right there in St. Peter's Square. I was here 12 years ago when Pope Francis was chosen, and it's the most incredible thing in the world. It's like nothing I've ever witnessed. You know, people just cheering. The bells in all the churches in Rome are ringing. And so you can already sense that a lot of people have made trips here and they're anticipating. But tomorrow's going to be a big day. And no doubt many of those involved are tired.
You had mentioned just the sheer number of cardinals and how that's making the process different this time around. But what about the diversity in geography of where these cardinals are representing and the ideological diversity as well?
It's a great question. 133 cardinals are voting inside the Sistine Chapel. It is the largest and most diverse group of cardinals. Traditionally, the Europeans have accounted for more than half of those electors. For the first time ever, it's less than half. Why? Because the number of cardinals is growing in Africa and in Asia. And so they have larger voting blocks. And also because the number of Catholics in those parts of the world are growing. That's why there's been some speculation that just as Pope Francis was the first pope from the Americas, from South America, that maybe we would see the first pope from Asia or the first pope from Africa. It's too soon to tell. Or you could have a return to the Italian pope, which has been the traditional type of pope. But I think largely what Pope Francis was trying to do is make sure that the church goes out to the peripheries, right? That the church grows. And so that's why he appointed so many cardinals and bishops. But we'll see now, because, and that's why I mentioned, I think, when we first started talking about the church being at a crossroads, because as many people are saying, what will this pope be able to do? Will it be continuity or change? Can it be both? How will the new Holy Father move the church forward? Will the new Holy Father be someone who is perhaps more calm, not as unpredictable as Pope Francis will be? But also, the church is shrinking. And of course, the finances are in trouble. There's a big piece in the Wall Street Journal about the finances at the Vatican and some of the concerns with that. So there's a lot on the future agenda for whoever becomes the next pope.
I loved your interview with the cardinal from Canada who said it's not an either or, change or continuity. It's going to be both. But you also posted something fascinating on X in terms of the digital shield around the chapel. Can you go into that for us?
Yeah, you know, that's one of the things about this conclave that I think fascinates everybody, and why it turned into that Oscar-nominated movie was, of course, the secrecy surrounding the conclave, right? I mean, the Sistine Chapel in itself and the Vatican, right? I mean, so fabulous that they're in the Sistine Chapel and of course, casting their battle with Michelangelo's The Last Judgment, right? Shining down on them as they're making this huge choice. But, you know, the other really interesting thing is just the history behind all of this. And because of that and everything that stakes, there is this amount of security that's involved. So inside the Sistine Chapel, they swept it for bugs. There are also electronic jamming devices to make sure that no one is listening. We've been told that if, you know, you're in the Vatican, you may have trouble using your cell phone or getting Wi-Fi, and that's because there are these jamming devices that have happened. Any of the staff that is around, including the security guards that are around the cardinals, yesterday they had to take this vow vow to secrecy. Today, you saw on CBS News where the Cardinals themselves were sworn to secrecy with this vote. They're not allowed to talk about it. And of course, this is the one other interesting thing. Before they went in there, before they began this whole process, they had to give up their phones. They had to give up any tablets, any watches. There's no television. They don't have access to newspapers. They don't have access to the radio. No communication with the outside world while they are still involved in this voting. They want them to be in a bubble. They want them to be in sort of lockdown, essentially, so that all they do is vote and then go back to Casa Santa Marta, eat, talk to one another, and move forward with this decision, this very important decision that will affect the future of the Catholic Church, which represents some 1.4 billion globally, and then, of course, just over 50 million in the United States.
I know you're getting weary, but if I can just steal you for a few more minutes. One of the most fascinating conversations I think you had this morning was about whether every cardinal wants to be pope, and really some of the experts you were talking to said it's such a daunting task that most actually are saying, please, not it. But in terms of everything that's considered, from, you were mentioning the finances, this is somebody who has to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, is what one of your experts was saying this morning. There are so many roles that this pope has to fill, and also inspiring the world, bringing more people back to the church, but also, fascinatingly, Nora, their age, because when we talk about some of the front runners, Cardinal Tagle, Cardinal Pizzaballa, they're in their 60s, and that's generally considered young for a pope.
That's right. That's right. I mean, right, there's a lot. You have to kind of be the perfect pope to deal with all of the challenges that are ahead. But I think based on everything that we have heard, they want to continue the pastoral approach that I think symbolized Pope Francis, right? This continued outreach. However, there seems to be an idea that they want someone who's perhaps a little bit more calm, a little bit more predictable. Something like that would favor the Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, who's the number 2 at the Vatican, which I learned today. He is actually the longest serving advisor to Pope Francis. So was, part of his inner circle. They weren't maybe necessarily close friends, but certainly a trusted advisor. And he is someone as seen as a moderate with a steady hand. The thought is that if he secured around some 50 votes in this initial vote, that it would probably be wrapped up quickly tomorrow. We don't know, and we may not know until sometime years from now if someone reveals that. But the thought is that if he did well tonight, that puts him in a good position tomorrow. If he did not, that certainly opens it up to a number of dark horses. And you're right, age is certainly a factor. Parolin, I believe, is about 70 years old, so he's kind of right in the sweet spot there. I have been watching very closely Cardinal Tagle of the Philippines, because, someone who has been to the Philippines, 80% of the Philippines is Catholic. It's growing. Cardinal Tagle, there's a charisma about him, if you will. There's video of him on the internet singing, Imagine, he sings and dances. He can appeal to younger people. And so, he seems like someone who, they've been calling him the Asian Francis, could be a Pope Francis II. However, everything that I read in the papers today and in talking to people, his star may have fallen a bit, not sure why, but that's sort of that's the T here. And that there was another Philippine cardinal who has gained some new attention because of remarks that he made last night, and that is Cardinal David, also of the Philippines. So again, it's too hard to tell, but I think one of the things to just think about is, well, many of these cardinals don't know each other well because they are from far-flung places. Many of them have been here for the past week and a half, and they have been having meals together. They've been listening to one another, so they have been getting a sense of one another, sizing each other up, and having conversations about who should be the leader of the church.
Nora, you brought us the tea. Hopefully tomorrow you get plenty of espresso. Thank you so much. Let's bring back CBS News Papal contributor Candida Moss now on the phone. Candida, I'm sure you've been listening to my conversation with Nora. Anything you want to add?
Well, I think Nora is exactly right when she talks about Cardinal Tagle. It seems as if his association with Francis and his personal charisma may actually hurt his chances with more conservative cardinals in conclave. And also their age, both Cardinal Tagle and Cardinal David, who Nora mentioned, they're relatively young. They are 67 and 66, respectively. And that's a liability for the cardinal, someone who might last for 30 years as Pope. Well, then what if it turns out you didn't like what you got? So it's easier for an older pope to be elected. And as Nora said, someone who is in one of the top positions today is going to be a front runner tomorrow. And that's where we'll see people moving around. When Pope Francis was elected, he was actually in second place on the first day, and then overtook the favorite Angelo Scola on the second day. So we may see something like that.
And Candida, to continue with some of my questions just on sheer logistics, we're talking about 133 cardinals and more support staff. Just sheer logistics-wise, where are they all sleeping after dinner time? Are there enough beds at Casa Santa Marta?
Well, there actually aren't enough beds at Casa Santa Marta. It was built to house 120 people, and there are 133 of them, so some of them have to sleep elsewhere. It's very cramped, both in those quarters and in the Sistine Chapel. And when you look at the images of the Sistine Chapel and the tables and the desk setup and the chairs, I have to say those chairs, which are used at a number of events around the Vatican, are very uncomfortable. So for this group of elderly men sat for hours on end in the Sistine Chapel, the whole affair, it's not just that they're cut off from the outside world. There's a lot of physical discomfort to this, and people have remarked on the food that they don't have as much of a say, and it's quite plain, in part to make sure that no one is smuggling messages in and out of conclave.
And we know that the digital shield is real, the sequestering is real, but Candida, it's my understanding that while the cardinals are here during conclave, there are avenues for them to have confession. Am I right?
That's exactly right. And that's important because you can imagine this is a very emotional time for the cardinals as well. They just lost their pope. They are engaged in what is effectively politics. And so confession is a very important aspect of their lives as they wrestle with their own motives and their own emotions. Being Pope is obviously something that we can imagine a cardinal aspires to be, but at the same time, it is physically grueling. There might be leading candidates who are confessing that they don't actually want to be Pope.
Candida, thank you so much. I do want to bring in CBS News Papal contributor Francis Rocca, who is in Rome. Before we talk about the actual emission of the black smoke and the significance of all that and what you're watching for tomorrow, just talk to me about the current scene there, because it looks to me like the square emptied out.
It did. It emptied out very quickly once people realized that there was nothing more to wait for. People were anxious. It's gotten pretty cold here, even though it's May, and so people, I guess, were anxious to go have dinner, as are the cardinals, I'm sure.
And what do you make of today's vote? I know that this was expected. We know that it came a little bit later than expected, but what is your take?
Well, I think people were puzzled and speculating wildly, and I was too, about why it was taking much longer, at least an hour longer than we thought. But I think it was that they have 133 cardinals voting instead of 115 last time, and each person votes. It's not just flipping a lever, you know. It's a ceremony. So that explains the extra time. And as the first ballot is traditionally the time when you sort of see who the front runners are and try to assess. That's what a cardinal told me yesterday. He said we won't really know where things stand until the first ballot. So this is the point of departure, but that doesn't mean we couldn't have a decision tomorrow. That's quite possible. Historically, that's been the case.
And
in
so
recent years.
Nora told us 9:15 in the morning local time they will reconvene, and then there will be a 12:30 break. Is that correct?
Right, and now if they elect someone in the first ballot tomorrow morning, we could get smoke at 10:30. If the smoke starts at that hour, we know that it's white, because they wouldn't. Otherwise, they'll wait till lunchtime. Yes, they'll have the break, then they'll come back in the afternoon, 2 more ballots.
Are you expecting more crowds tomorrow, knowing that the last 3 popes have been elected in 2 or 3 days, knowing how significant tomorrow could be for this process?
No, absolutely. I think that people will come out, especially since, you know, the weather's been pretty nice in general. As I said, it got chilly this evening, but people will come absolutely because, as you say, in the last couple of times it's happened in the second day.
Anything else you want to add before we let you go?
Well, I guess if, let's say, it goes beyond tomorrow, things are going to start getting interesting and people are going to start speculating a lot. The longer it goes, the more unpredictable it becomes.
Okay, Francis Rocco, you'll be there to guide us through it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to get to breaking news now out of Memphis.
This has been breaking news.
Commuters heading into Manhattan this morning are dealing with major disruptions on the Long Island Railroad. A power issue in one of the East River tunnels causing delays, cancellations, and diversions. Natalie Dudras at Penn State.